Good day. Just over a week ago, I did a video for this channel in which I discussed Kamala Harris's disastrous visit to Vietnam, where she managed to both annoy and upset her Vietnamese hosts by making belligerent comments against China, with which Vietnam has had an occasionally fraught relationship and with which it has a dispute over certain islands in the South China Sea, whilst at the same time laying a wreath at the monument commemorating the location where the former Senator John McCain was shot down during the Vietnam War, when, of course, John McCain was bombing the Vietnamese. Now, these were, to put it mildly, maladroit actions by Kamala Harris, which alarmed and antagonized the Vietnamese at precisely the time when the United States has been working exceptionally hard to win Vietnam over to this alliance that the United States is trying to build in the Pacific region against China. As I pointed out in that video, the Vietnamese, alarmed and annoyed by Kamala Harris's statements, called in the Chinese ambassador to reassure him that Kamala Harris was not speaking for Vietnam and that Vietnam had no interest and no intention of getting drawn into any sort of anti-Chinese alliance with the United States. Now, following that disastrous visit, Vietnam is now hosting the trip of another extremely important and very powerful visitor, and that is none other than Wang Yi, Foreign Minister of the People's Republic of China. And the two visits are an extraordinary study in contrasts. Now, before I go on to discuss Wang Yi's visit to Vietnam, I would say that, first of all, it's a lot longer than Kamala Harris's visit. Wang Yi has visited Vietnam and been there for 3 days. He's also met a whole string of important people, including Vietnam's foreign minister, its prime minister, and the general secretary of Vietnam's Communist Party, who is in effect the actual leader of Vietnam. More about that in a moment. This visit that Wang Yi has made also was clearly organized sometime before Kamala Harris's visit. So it was clearly intended both by the Vietnamese and by the Chinese to counterbalance Kamala Harris's visit and to emphasize that Vietnam is not intending to become any kind of ally of the United States against China. And one has to say straight away that the fact that the Vietnamese organized this visit with Wang Yi in that way shows that even if Kamala Harris had acted with a great deal more tact than she showed, the Vietnamese would not have allied themselves with the United States against China, because they clearly and obviously do not consider it to be in their interests to do so. But setting that to one side, there is no doubt at all that the character of Wang Yi's visit to Vietnam has been heavily influenced by Kamala Harris's visit, with both the Chinese and the Vietnamese going out of their way to speak extremely warmly about each other, emphasize the two countries' cooperation and friendship, and talk in a way that, to be straightforward about it, the Vietnamese did not use when Kamala Harris was present, and which shows that at the moment the reality is that Vietnam's relations with China are much friendlier and much warmer than they are with the United States. Now, that, I suspect, might not have been the case had Kamala Harris acted in a more diplomatic way. The Vietnamese, to the extent that I can gauge their policy, were, prior to her visit, aiming at some sort of equidistance between themselves, China on the one hand and the United States on the other. The effect of Kamala Harris's visit has been, on the contrary, to make Vietnam tilt more towards China. That is the takeaway I make from the very warm words that the Vietnamese extended to their Chinese visitor, and the words were not just warm, but the content was also extremely interesting. Now, there have been an enormous flurry of documents pouring out from the Vietnamese and the Chinese over the course of Wang Yi's visit. We have 3 separate readouts from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. They're all 3 extremely long, and I'm not going to read them through because to do so would extend this video to several hours. But I will touch on some of the words which appear in them. And before I do that, I want to make one specific observation about all of these interactions between Wang Yi and the Vietnamese, which is that if you take what is said purely from the readouts and the public statements, you would assume or conclude that Wang Yi and the Vietnamese did not mention the United States at all. They said nothing. These readouts do not refer to the United States by name. They do refer to the United States by implication. We will come to that shortly. But they are very careful to make or to show no public anti-American statements. That is an extraordinary contrast to the outspoken anti-Chinese statements made by Kamala Harris while she was in Vietnam. And the reason for that is that Wang Yi, who is, unlike Kamala Harris, a professional diplomat, and a diplomat, by the way, to his fingertips, understood very well the sensitivities of his Vietnamese hosts on this question, and he understood that he should not, whilst in Vietnam, annoy his hosts by making critical comments about a third country, the United States, with which Vietnam still aims to have at least cordial relations. So Wang Yi, unlike Kamala Harris, showed respect to his hosts. He did not criticize the United States, at least not overtly, and that is a large factor in explaining the warm words and the friendly comments that Wang Yi was able to exchange with his Vietnamese interlocutors. Moreover, the entire accent of Wang Yi's comments was not to suggest to Vietnam that it is in any particular danger, either from the United States or from anywhere else. It is to talk instead about the excellent relations that have existed between Vietnam and China in the past, and to talk about the way in which these relations can be enhanced and improved so as to make them even friendlier and even closer. So the accent entirely was on the positive, never on the negative. Contrast that again with Kamala Harris's approach, where she talks about the Chinese bullying and threatening people, which, as I said, far from reassuring the Vietnamese, only annoyed and alarmed them. The result is that over the course of this 3-day visit on the part of Wang Yi to Vietnam, the Vietnamese felt no need to call in the American ambassador to reassure him that Vietnam is not going to ally itself with China against the United States or anything like that. On the contrary, this was a trouble-free, friendly visit, one which has improved Chinese-Vietnamese relations, in contrast to the disastrous visit by Kamala Harris, which has damaged Vietnamese-US relations. Now, let's turn to some of these readouts, and I'm going to go first of all to the readouts that the Chinese Foreign Ministry has provided. And they're very extensive, And the first one, and perhaps in some ways the most important one, is the one between Wang Yi and the Vietnamese foreign minister, Mr. Bui Tan Son. I apologize to any Vietnamese people if the pronunciation of Vietnamese names is wrong. I know a little bit about how to pronounce Chinese names. I'm afraid I'm not so familiar with Vietnamese names, and I apologize if some of my pronunciation here is wrong. Anyway, this particular readout I'm going to read out in full, because though the foreign minister, the Vietnamese foreign minister, is not the most senior official whom Wang Yi talked to, he is the equivalent, he holds the equivalent rank to Wang Yi in the Vietnamese leadership, and I suspect that these talks were the most extensive ones. Anyway, this is what this readout says. On September 11th, 2021, State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who was on an official visit to Vietnam, held talks with Vietnamese Foreign Minister Bui Tan Son in Hanoi. Wang Yi said General Secretary Xi Jinping pointed out that China and Vietnam are a community with a shared future of strategic significance. Under the strategic guidance of the top leaders of the two parties and both countries, China-Vietnam relations have been moving forward despite profound changes in the international situation and the impacts of the pandemic. China always gives priority to the development of China-Vietnam relations in its neighbourhood diplomacy, firmly supports the successful administration of the new leadership of the Vietnamese party and government, firmly supports the Vietnamese people in their efforts to achieve the two centenary goals, and firmly supports Vietnam to explore the development path that suits its national conditions. China is willing to join hands with Vietnam to maintain the momentum of healthy, stable, and comprehensive development of relations between the two countries. Wang Yi pointed out that in the face of changes rarely seen in a century, the two sides should stick to their shared ideals and convictions, push forward their respective socialist causes, and protect the most significant and fundamental political situation between the two countries. China is willing to maintain high-level and all-level exchanges with Vietnam in a flexible manner amid the pandemic, and will spare no effort to help Vietnam defeat the pandemic. China hopes that both sides could push forward the connectivity of China's Belt and Road Initiative with Vietnam's two corridors and one economic circle plan, while promoting cooperation in mega projects and high technology, including 5G, for mutual benefits and win-win results. Now, a few points to make here. Firstly, heavy emphasis here on cooperation, on the pandemic, on economic issues and such things. But note the careful way in which the Chinese are subtly reminding Vietnam that China and Vietnam share political and economic systems. They're both socialist, or as we tend to say in the West, communist countries. They share a similar structure and political philosophy. And note how Wang Yi and the Chinese readout refer to Xi Jinping not as China's president, but as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, emphasizing the fact that China is a communist country, a country led by the Chinese Communist Party, just as Vietnam is a communist or socialist country led by the Vietnamese Communist Party. So there is a careful reminder there of the shared ideological positions of the leaderships of the two countries. Anyway, to continue. Wang Yi said China appreciates Vietnam's objective and just stance on pandemic origins tracing, and wishes to work with the Vietnamese side to oppose the politicization of the pandemic, the labeling of the infection, and the instrumentalization of the origins tracing so as to jointly safeguard the health and common interests of mankind. Both sides should advocate and practice genuine multilateralism, safeguard the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries, oppose attempts to politicize human rights issues, and safeguard the just rights and interests of the developing countries. China is willing to work together with Vietnam to focus on the Asia-Pacific and East Asia, firmly push ahead ASEAN centrality in regional cooperation, and prevent external forces from impairing ASEAN's central role. Both sides need to carry on with their close coordination, make thoughtful preparations for the upcoming leaders' meetings on East Asia cooperation, as well as a summit commemorating the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations, and speed up the ratification and entry into force of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now, note the subtle criticism of the United States. It is the United States, obviously, that Wang Yi is referring to when he talks about the politicization of the question of the origins of the pandemic. And note also that Wang Yi is thanking the Vietnamese for not joining that particular bandwagon, for refusing to become involved in what the Chinese see as a politicized campaign by the United States to manipulate the issue of pandemic origins so as to hit out at China. And note also, again, the careful reminder about how China, unlike the United States, believes in multipolarity. It does not seek to dominate other countries, well, at least that's what the Chinese say, and it does not seek to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, and claims no right to do so, which of course the United States openly does. So we have all those careful comments by Wang Yi, and the way in which Wang Yi has expressed them is intended to remind the Vietnamese that China takes a much more diplomatic and respectful approach to Vietnam than does the United States, that he is a far better diplomat than Kamala Harris is, and that it is easier, it will be more comfortable for Vietnam to work in future with China than it will be with the United States, which has all its ideological obsessions and which is an overbearing hegemon. So all very subtle, but no actual mention of the United States by name, no criticism, no overt criticism of the United States, only very careful, very subtle language impliedly criticizing the United States. Everybody knows whom Wang Yi is talking about. He doesn't need to spell it out. Then we come to the really tough question. Wang Yi said on the South China Sea issue, the two sides should, guided by the consensus reached by the leaders of the two parties and both countries, abide by the existing agreements, solve differences through dialogue and negotiation, and avoid unilateral actions that might complicate or escalate the situation. The two sides should expand maritime cooperation based on the principle of equality and mutual benefit, and transform maritime issues from friction into cooperation, from easy and small ones to difficult and big ones, so as to send a positive signal to the outside world. China is willing to work with Vietnam and other ASEAN nations to actively push forward consultations on the code of conduct in the South China Sea, and to reach an agreement at an early date that is effective, of practical significance, and in line with international law. Now, here we see the Chinese approach. They're completely ignoring what the United States is saying about the South China Sea. They're saying to countries like Vietnam, with which they have issues about the South China Sea. Let's work together. Let's cooperate to the extent that we can to keep the South China Sea peaceful. Let's build up step by step until we can reach a consensus about how the South China Sea should be administered. Let's not let the Americans come in and make a big issue of the whole matter. Let's keep the Americans at arm's length. But again, no specific reference to the United States. But also, note these very important words that China and Vietnam should expand maritime cooperation based on the principle of equality and mutual benefit. And here again, Wang Yi is making a subtle contrast between China's stance and that of the United States. The United States treats no country like an equal. China claims that it does. Whether it does so in fact is, of course, another matter. But words have consequences. The Vietnamese being told by the Chinese that their country is being treated by China as an equal will feel respected, even if, of course, as worldly people who are not naive in any way, the Vietnamese are fully aware of the massive power imbalance between themselves and China, and know that when Wang Yi talks about equality, the reality to a great extent, is otherwise. But nonetheless, Wang Yi is showing the Vietnamese respect, a type of respect which no American diplomat today is capable of, and which, of course, Kamala Harris absolutely never showed at any point during her visit. And now we come to the very interesting words, which, and I'm of course reading from the Chinese readout, that the Vietnamese foreign minister gave in response. And these were the words as reported by the Vietnamese foreign minister. The Chinese report that the Vietnamese foreign minister said, Bui Thanh Son congratulated China on the upcoming 72nd anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. He said that Vietnam always remembers and thanks China's support for Vietnam's revolution and construction. Now, that is a very clear reference to China's support of Vietnam during Vietnam's independence war against France in the early 1950s, and for China's support to Vietnam during the Vietnam War against the United States in the 1960s. Anyway, to continue. Vietnam is grateful to China for its great help in fighting the pandemic. The party, the government, and the people of Vietnam always attach great importance to developing sustained, healthy, and stable relations with the party, the government, and the people of China. Always regard the relations with China as their top diplomatic priority, and always support the development and growth of socialist China. So, the Vietnamese foreign minister here acknowledges that Vietnam and China have shared political systems and ideologies. Vietnam does far from wanting China to fail, far from seeing China as any sort of threat, regards it as an ideologically close and friendly country, and Vietnam wants it to succeed and prioritizes good relations with China as its major diplomatic effort. To continue, Vietnam will continue to unequivocally support China on issues such as democracy, human rights, and China's Hong Kong, Western China, and Taiwan issues, as well as the origins tracing of the pandemic. Vietnam hopes that the two sides will maintain high-level exchanges, carry out exchanges in border areas, maintain the smooth flow of regional supply and production chains, and work for breakthroughs in pragmatic cooperation in various fields. So there we have it. The Vietnamese will not support the United States on any issue that affects China's domestic policies. It will not support the United States' interference in China's internal affairs, or what the Chinese see as its internal affairs, be it on the issues of democracy, human rights, Hong Kong, the problems in Western China. The actual readout refers to the relevant provinces in Western China, but I'm not going to mention them by name. You can see it in the readout itself, and also on the question of the pandemic origins issue. Here we see Vietnam overtly allying itself with China against the United States. Again, the United States is not specifically mentioned, but everybody knows who is being referred to. And then it continues. Vietnam is willing to deepen cooperation with China in medical research, development and production, and strive to ensure the health of Chinese citizens in Vietnam. Vietnam highly appreciates the important role China plays in international and regional affairs, and is willing to work with China to uphold multilateralism with the United Nations at its core, and is based on the United Nations Charter and international law, uphold common values of the two countries, and maintain multilateral coordination and cooperation. A comprehensive repudiation here of US pretensions. The rules-based international order gets no mention. That goes without saying. It's all going to be based on international law, multipolarity, multilateralism, equal relations between states, with the United Nations at the core of the international system. That is the Chinese position. It is diametrically opposed to the American position. I've discussed this in many programs, and here we see the Vietnamese foreign minister saying to the Chinese foreign minister that on these issues, Vietnam is aligned entirely with China. And to continue, Vietnam firmly supports the establishment of the ASEAN-China Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, hopes to push for the RCEP to take effect at an early date, and will continue to actively promote the Lancang-Mekong cooperation. On the South China Sea issue, Vietnam hopes that the two sides will strictly abide by the consensus reached by the two leaders of the two countries, manage their difficulties with restraint, refrain from taking any action that might complicate the situation, continue to promote cooperation in the Beibu Gulf and low sensitivity fields, and push for an early conclusion of the COC. So, on the one hand, Vietnam will press for further cooperation with China. It aims for a strategic partnership, a comprehensive strategic partnership between Vietnam and ASEAN, the group of Southeast Asian states, and China. And on the South China Sea issue, Vietnam also wants a peaceful relationship with China. There are differences, but these are differences that can be solved, or at least moderated, through negotiation and cooperation, and it will work with China to try to build up the relationship in the South China Sea based on cooperation and mutual trust. And finally, we hear that the two sides also exchange views on international and regional issues of common concern. I wonder what that was, and I wonder what issues the two of them discussed with each other. But I'm pretty sure that that paragraph discusses, to a great extent, American military deployments in the South China Sea and elsewhere. But anyway, here you see the Vietnamese making it very clear to the Chinese that they're not aligning with the United States on issues sensitive to China. On the contrary, they recognize the ideological affinities with China. They appreciate the respect China extends to Vietnam. They recognize the benefits to themselves of deepening cooperation with China, and at the same time, they will not get drawn into a conflict with China over the South China Sea, a conflict which the United States is trying, as far as the Chinese and perhaps the Vietnamese also are concerned, a conflict which the United States is for the moment seeking to aggravate. And on the issues of China's unity, well, I suspect that's one of the regional issues which were discussed. Obviously, Vietnam supports China. So that is the foreign minister. That is the readout of the meetings with the foreign minister. We have very similar words expressed about the contacts with the, expressed in the readouts with the Prime Minister, the Vietnamese Prime Minister, Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh. Again, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing his words correctly. But we have words in that readout, and again, I'm taking this from the Chinese readout, that a strong and prosperous China represents an opportunity for Vietnam, and China's development has provided Vietnam with development models and essential experience for reference. Vietnam regards its relations with China as a top priority in its foreign policy. Vietnam stands ready to work with China to enhance communication and cooperation between the top leaders of the two parties and countries in various fields, and enhance strategic mutual trust and friendship between the two countries. And we see again how the Vietnamese and the Chinese both agree on the South China Sea issue that both sides must abide by the political consensus reached by the leaders of the two parties, and both countries adhere to the agreements signed by both sides, resolve differences and disputes through friendly consultations, and refrain from unilateral actions to ensure overall maritime stability. And when we come to Wang Yi's meetings with the Secretary General of Vietnam's Communist Party, Nguyen Phu Trong, who is in effect the leader of Vietnam, we see the same things. We see again very similar words expressed in the readout, and the fact that the two countries again are socialist countries. They have a great deal of ideological affinity. Neither side wants to see relations between the two countries become difficult and tense. Now, of course, these are Chinese readouts. Perhaps the Vietnamese will report things differently. Well, in fact, not. We can go to the Vietnamese Communist Party's own account of these things, and we will find there that, on the contrary, the Vietnamese Communist Party appears to be satisfied with the way in which relations are going. And I take this from VnExpress. Vietnam, China should control East Sea disputes. Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh called for Vietnam and China to control disputes well and maintain a peaceful and stable environment at sea. Receiving Chinese State Councillor and Minister of Foreign Affairs Wang Yi in Hanoi, Chin also affirmed that Vietnam treasures its relations with China and considers this as a leading priority in its foreign policy. On the East Sea issue, the Prime Minister stressed that both sides should instruct their law enforcement forces at sea to adhere to the high-level common perceptions and the Vietnamese-Chinese agreement on basic principles guiding the settlement of sea-related issues. Both sides should strive to properly settle and control disputes, maintain a peaceful and stable environment at sea, he said. And there's a great deal more. So overall, when one goes through the details of what the Vietnamese are saying, it is very close. In fact, it's essentially identical to the Chinese readouts. I've taken it from the Chinese readouts because they're a bit more detailed, but the Vietnamese confirm the accuracy of those Chinese readouts. So here we see the effect of Kamala Harris's trip to Vietnam. She came to Vietnam, she annoyed her hosts, she made belligerent comments about China. She has pushed the Vietnamese, in effect, not just to repudiate the stance that she herself was taking whilst on Vietnamese territory, but on the contrary, to reassure and tell the Chinese, when Wang Yi came to visit them and is now currently, of course, in Hanoi, they reassured the Chinese, the Vietnamese have reassured the Chinese that yes, they too, like China, are a socialist country. They aim for deeper cooperation with China. They have no interest in getting drawn into any battle or fight with China because the United States wants them to do that. They want peace in the South China Sea. They want to cooperate with China in the South China Sea. They seek to build trust in the South China Sea and find a way to manage the territorial dispute between these two countries, and ultimately to find a means to resolve it peacefully. So they will not ally with the United States against China, and all attempts by the Americans to get them to do so are destined or predestined to fail. So there we are. That is the sum total of what Kamala Harris has achieved. Not only did she annoy and antagonize her Vietnamese hosts, but on the occasion of Wang Yi's visit, the Vietnamese have been obliged to go out of their way to make public the fact that on a multiplicity of issues, they are closer to China than they are to the United States. In fact, as of this moment in time, and as a direct consequence of her visit, and it must also be said, partly in consequence of Wang Yi's hard work and the wisdom of Vietnam's own leadership, at this moment in time, far from aligning itself with the United States against China, at this moment in time, Vietnam seems a great deal friendlier and closer to China than it is with respect to the United States. So, Kamala Harris's trip to Vietnam has been confirmed as the total debacle that it appeared to be when I made that program a week ago. Now, again, I want to stress there was never any possibility of Vietnam allying itself with the United States against China. Wise diplomats in Washington would have understood that. They would have grasped the limits of what could be done. They would nonetheless have realized that there are tensions between the Vietnamese and the Chinese, and they would have tried to exploit them in a subtle way. They would have gone to Vietnam, they would have spoken to Vietnam about the shared tragedies, perhaps, of the Vietnam War. They might have expressed some remorse and sorrow about what happened in the 1960s. They would have reassured the Vietnamese that the United States has turned a new leaf, that it is interested in working with Vietnam, that it respects and admires Vietnam's achievement, that it has no wish to have future conflicts with Vietnam, and that far from that, if Vietnam is ever in difficulties, it can rely upon the United States. No overt criticism of China in all those statements, but they would have been appreciated by the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese would have felt that the United States was treating with them with respect, and at that point they might have been tempted to edge a little closer to the United States in order to keep a greater distance from China. And had that happened, well, perhaps, in fact, almost certainly, the words exchanged between Wang Yi and his Chinese interlocutors would have been a great deal less fulsome, and most probably the Vietnamese would have been unwilling to say to the Chinese that they share China's position on so many issues. So, Kamala Harris, and not just, by the way, Kamala Harris, but other American diplomats have completely failed in Vietnam. That is perhaps the single most important to take away from Wang Yi's visit. Instead of drawing Vietnam closer to themselves, closer to the United States, they have pushed Vietnam away, and they have forced Vietnam to align more closely with China than it might otherwise have done, and than it might otherwise have wanted to do. Nothing demonstrates better the damage amateurism does to diplomacy than the incompetent behaviour, not just of Kamala Harris, but of people like Lloyd Austin and other top American visitors to Vietnam. No recognition of the concerns and sensitivities of the host country, coming to that country like a bull in a china shop, coming under the ludicrous slogan, America is back, which obviously is not going to wear well in a place like Vietnam, praising a former bomber of Vietnam like John McCain, reminding everybody of America's role in the Vietnam War, and making extraordinary and outspoken criticisms of China. All it's achieved is to push the Vietnamese away. One can almost see the glint in the eye of the Politburo in Beijing. Thank you for joining me for this program today. I look forward to you joining me in future programs on this channel. Also, please remember to check out our main channel, the Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend Alex Christoforou. And also, please check us out on our other channels, on our other platforms, I should say, especially Locals, where we have a thriving community and where we are now providing or publishing exclusive content. There are a few technical issues there still, but these are being rapidly resolved, and we are extremely pleased with what is happening on that particular platform. And also, by the way, we are relishing the freedom to speak openly and freely on that platform, which up to now we haven't been able to do. And also, please look us up on our other platforms, especially the new free speech platform, SuperU, which we are also very excited about. And lastly, if you want to support us, please do so via Patreon and Subscribestar. And also remember to go to our shop, buy the amazing things that you will find there, our great magic mugs, our hats, our hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, and all the rest. And if you've liked this video, please remember to press the like button, and please also remember to check your subscription to this channel. Thank you again for joining me today. I look forward to you joining me again soon, and have a wonderful day until then.